Welcome everybody. Oh, wow, we're a full house today. Excited to welcome our distinguished speaker. She's all the way from Houston, Texas. And Samira Nurali is here, and she's going to be speaking about a poetic journey to recovery. And I'd like to take the opportunity now to, of course, thank our sponsors and invite Yvette Patterson up here from Sovereign Health. She's sponsoring the lunch.
First of all, I'd like to thank Josie for allowing us to be a part of our sponsoring the lunch. This is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to get a chance to meet and network and find out what's really going on here in our community. Sovereign Health is new to the desert. We have several different locations. We have an adolescent program that is in San Diego. We're treating dual diagnosis and mental health. And what is exciting to me about Sovereign Health is the mental health component. Here in the Inland Empire, in the desert, in Riverside County, in San Bernardino, there is no treatment that is licensed for mental health. So when it comes down to that aspect, that gets exciting to me, to get out and talk about and to network that part of Sovereign Health. We also do a brain restoration where we're putting enzymes back into your body, the B12s, and natural enzymes through an IV. We do several different detoxes. I won't go on and take the show, but I want to say thank you, and I want to say thank you to Josie for allowing us to be a part of.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about Samira Nurali, whom I've had the pleasure of getting to know over the last month or so. We've been roommates in a few hotels. Wait, I don't know how that sounded.
Details.
I'll leave you guessing. Engaging in the creative process is more than just self-expression. It's an opportunity for recovery, self-discovery, and inner revolution. Samira will be using a Jungian lens to discuss how those in recovery can use poetry, writing, and other artistic modalities to become empowered and spiritually awakened. Samira Nurali, J.D., is a published poet, musician, and playwright, in addition to being the creative editor of recoveryview.com. Her original works explore trauma, survival, identity, and relationships. Presently, Samira shares her own transformative experiences in recovery as a teacher in order to help others find their voice through the literary and performing arts. Sounds amazing and wonderful, doesn't it? Samira has, one of her books is called A Simple Rebirth, and we happen to have 20 copies on the table out there, and they are for sale for $20, so I'm sure that you will enjoy reading Samira's wonderful works. So again, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Samira Nurali, our speaker for today. Let's give her a round.
Okay, hello everyone, my name is Samira, and I am not a spoken word poet. I wrote some poems in that book outside. Please do take a look, because in it is my truth. Writing it was quite a process, a painful extraction of abstractions from my heart about a sexual assault for which I never entirely assigned fault to the rapist, even though my therapist said, "It's not your fault." Perhaps it's also because she mumbled something about revolutionizing all that I thought was myself, integrating all of the parts of me, light and dark, the incarcerated and the free. But of course I was too busy desperately rebandaging a constantly bleeding wound, so I dismissed the young therapist's mumblings. "I am the victim," I said aloud. I didn't want to integrate and be forced to face my own shadow. I was a victim. The capital V victim does not have a shadow. I was just stating what I knew to be a fact. In fact, I was on my way to becoming a lawyer and could argue anything for any side and could recognize a true victim all the way from a mile because I wasn't in denial. I was a victim, and the victim cannot have a shadow. Even Hollywood agreed. The victim is always innocent or somehow exonerated. She's one-sided, one-dimensional, liberated at the end of a film, somehow, after being required to do almost nothing, is consecrated by the masses as a heroine for our growing children to look at as some kind of a role model. Heroine for everyone addicted to be a victim. And at the time, I didn't know. So why should I face my shadow? And in that therapy session, after all of my brilliant logical arguing in favor of my perpetual victimhood, the young therapist in training was lost for words and insinuated I was going to make a great lawyer someday. I had stumped her for a few minutes, but I didn't care. You see, I wanted stability within because I thought stability was the end goal, so I chose stability in victimization. And I missed the point about integration and transformation and revolution. Yeah, right. Who wanted that when stability was an option? But soon enough, I wasn't happy. The victim norm I had established within was too concrete, too addictive, and too inviting to more addictions. Soon enough, a friend came along who told me I couldn't see myself. The mirror that was within was being fogged up by smoke. The revolution that was happening within was being smothered by substance. He suggested I read some poetry by those mystical Sufis and learn about their addiction to God. So I did. I picked up a little Rumi, Gibran, and Khusro, and how the goal of inner peace was fana, or the annihilation of ego. I then started torrentially pouring out my own words and phrases after years of a poetic drought. It was an exercise in exorcism. My shadow escaped between an apostrophe and an S. It was a force to be reckoned with. It was creative and aggressive, bold and impressive. I stood nervous and naked before the truth of what it meant to be me. The good, the bad, the ugly, the kind, the elusive, the free. Instead of piecing out in my addiction to victimhood, I started piecing together shards of light and dark through the lantern of words, and piecing together the shattered parts of my personality. Some parts were bad, some parts were good, and some parts I didn't dare to judge because I had no definite words for them, just metaphors. And some parts eluded even metaphors because they were too mysterious for verbal excavation. But at times of deep calm, I know there is a beat or melody or color or character that understands that mysterious archetypal entity buried deep in the evolutionary history of my cells and the spiritual history of my soul. It took me 10 years, but I wrote my poems and established a new and healthier norm. And then 2 years later, I turned 30, and the shattering of my norm started all over again because the revolution never ends. My name is Samira, and I might be a spoken word poet. I want to talk to you about creativity and recovery. When I was in my first few years of recovery, I didn't realize that I didn't know how to self-empower. And then I took a class called Psychology and the Arts. And although I had been a psychology major and had been learning a lot about Carl Jung and his theories, I was never truly intimately acquainted with what that meant and what that meant in action. But it was psychology and the arts that helped me to understand that. In that class I studied Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. Many of you may be familiar with that. And that provided for me the kind of validation that I had never received. I didn't think that I could find that even academically, and it was there in that work. So today when I talk about creativity and recovery, I'm often talking about the exact same thing. I may even switch out words. And also when I talk about creativity, I'm not just talking about the process of creating a piece of art or a poem. I may also be talking about the analysis of someone else's work or the feeling of someone else's work, because when we read the work of others or look at the artistic work of others, we are also applying creativity to that process of even analysis. So in the description on the flyer, it says that I'm going to be talking about an inner revolution. So I want to hear from you all about what you think revolution is. Can we get a volunteer just to throw out a word, a phrase?
Freedom.
Freedom, okay. Change.
Turning around.
Turning around. Okay, and that's all a part of revolution. Here is the dictionary definition. A forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system. Rebellion, revolt, insurrection, mutiny, uprising, riot, rioting, insurgence, seizure of power, coup d'etat. Okay, so can someone tell me maybe how this relates to inner revolution? Or does it at all? You feel like it does? Okay. How would you describe that?
It fights our dual duality.
And so Jung would respond to that as well, saying that there is inner division that occurs, just like in a social revolution. And what's interesting about Jung's view on a true and authentic inner revolution is that it's not driven by personal urges for power. It is truly sudden and authentic and a true awakening in that way. So not that there is not progress or that there is not labor involved or passion involved in that, but that in order for it to be authentic, it cannot be driven by personal urges. Now, to relate that to the arts. So what's going on in the artistic mind then? How is this revolution happening? When we're looking at a painter or a poet, it all looks pretty peaceful and nice, right? We're not really seeing the revolution necessarily. But what's happening in an artist's mind, according to Jung, is that the art is an innate drive that is seizing the person and using the person as the art's instrument. The person ceases to have personal aims, personal goals, personal will, and is just acting out in the way that that needs to be done for the art to be created. And in a sense, the artist is then not man, lowercase man, but uppercase M, man, representing the collective unconscious, or representing all of mankind when in the act of creation. So the artist is functioning out of what we would call liminal space. So liminal space is a threshold space, and we borrow the word liminal space from anthropology to represent that space between adolescence and adulthood. That it's a rite of passage, essentially, where one goes through the liminal space to become an adult. And so it's in a similar space where an artist is functioning out of. And I just want to clarify that when I'm talking about an artist, I'm not talking about the profession of being an artist. A person who is acting in terms of making art, that person is an artist. So they're functioning out of this threshold space. And they have access to what is being housed in the unconscious mind. So what is in the unconscious mind? Does anyone want to throw anything out?
Would it be I'm not good enough? Would that be in the unconscious mind? Trauma.
Sure, traumas. How about archetypes? Archetypes are being housed down there, and how important are archetypes, right? The original models, the symbols that people would have understood 6,000, 10,000 years ago, and they still understand exactly what that means today. When you mention an archetype, you mention a mother, a father, you tell a story about a hero and a villain, they know exactly what you're talking about, right? So the archetypes are down in that space. Artists in these theories are said to have special access to that space and to that substratum of the mind that houses the archetypes. And they have the ability to pull those archetypes and code them to where everyone can experience them in their conscious minds. So that coding then becomes available to an audience. An audience then is able to reach down there as well, into this collective unconscious space. And they get to also experience all of this special knowledge. So before I get into this, the prerequisites for a revolution is where we're going next. I'd like to talk a little bit about art and its use in therapy and that kind of thing. When we talk about the creation of art, we're usually looking at it in terms of self-expressive art, right? We're trying to express our feelings, perhaps. I'm going to call that lowercase s self-expression, right? Oftentimes, the art that we're creating for someone else to see is going to be for self-aggrandizement, or it's going to be somehow alleviating the feelings of the ego. But when we're talking about the arts in the way that Carl Jung might have talked about the arts, we're talking about maybe capital S self-expression. So this is expression of true self, so non-self-aggrandizement in this art. So what are the prerequisites for a revolution? Anybody have any thoughts?
Unrest.
Okay, unrest, discomfort. Yeah. Change, pain.
Identify the problem or the issue.
Okay. All right. I think all of those are absolutely correct, and they probably fit into these here. Conflict, passion, and destruction. Okay. So revolution is a pretty big deal. It's not a little change here and there. It's a really big deal. It's an intense transformation of a current structure, and perhaps a destruction of the current structure. So in terms of conflict, what kind of conflict might someone be dealing with when they're creating art? Whether it's a past trauma or anything like that, what kind of conflict might that be when they're creating true art and when we're facilitating an environment where true art can be created?
Paradox.
Paradox, yeah. Disturbance, yeah.
Isn't some of it unconscious?
Absolutely.
Could it be emotions?
Absolutely, yes. So emotions, and that might even be on the personal level versus the collective level, right? Perhaps the lowercase s that I use to describe egoistic creation of art versus creation of something that expresses true self, right? So there's all this sort of conflict there. Passion as well. So I wanted to give you a dictionary definition of passion. So there it is. Powerful emotions such as love, joy, hatred, or anger, an abandoned display of emotion. The synonyms are fervor, fire, zeal, ardor, and then the final one, the sufferings of Jesus in the period following the Last Supper, including the crucifixion, martyrdom. So again, we're not talking about little changes. These are huge changes when we're talking about inner revolution. And then finally, we have the destruction, which is the shattering, right, of the existing structure and inviting then the product of the revolution, which would be the new structure that's in place, right? And so if a person's dealing with issues with identity or with identifying with the trauma, that kind of thing, identifying with an addiction, the shattering would have to happen through the conflict and then the passion. And then the product that would emerge is perhaps a new identity. Okay, so poetry. Where is the revolution in poetry? So poetry is pretty fluffy, right? We think poetry is a lot of fluff. Or we're very focused on the aesthetic of it. Perhaps it's being used as a meditative device, being used as a way to bliss out or to just enjoy a moment. And all of those things are great. Where might the revolution be, though? The big conflict here, though, is what? What is the conflict? Besides the content of the poem. Ourself? Self, yeah. How about reality orientation? Is there some sense that perhaps a person is not understanding reality, right? We're using the magician as an archetype in that poem. So what's happening here is art is being used for reality orientation. We're getting to know where we are. Now, I'm not even sure whether this person has actually been through any of the things that he's talking about. It seems like he has, but we're not sure. He could just be a fantastic performer, right? But being able to be on the outside of a rational process and to use poetry, which is essentially a non-rational or perhaps even a supra-rational process, to be able to understand reality. That's pretty revolutionary. That I'm actually outside of reality, in a different world, to understand reality. And then also another aspect of this is when a person is engaged in writing poetry, whether it's for therapeutic purposes or even just to produce a fantastic piece of work, right, a fantastic piece of art, the ego cannot be involved. I don't know if you can see here, but the ego seemed entirely removed, right? The ego was just not even involved. The person was able to either see himself in his process or this particular process from somewhere else. What is the difference between poetic recitation or something deliberate and just talking? You know, I know there's a lot of therapists in the room, and so how might this be different? What could you take away from this, or what's different about this and talking? Having someone talk something out in therapy.
It's a narrative.
It's a narrative. Okay. Anything else?
You know, in therapy, someone would say, "Oh, I am feeling this," but in poetry, you are actually feeling it, rather than saying, "I am feeling
So
this."
it's experiencing versus reflecting. Okay.
Experience.
I think a poet is allowed freedom to throw word associations around without being connected and allow imagination to really flourish. Whereas I think in a therapeutic session or counseling session, we want to have some sense of sense that there's some logic or something. I think the poet doesn't have to be bound by that.
Absolutely. Okay, so yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. A person might talk and talk and talk and talk and talk in therapy, and then at the end of it, feel even worse than when they started, because the thing that they were trying to say was outside of the rational lingual process, right? So language can only do so much. What makes poetry a little bit separate and different from that type of rational lingual process is the fact that poetry is musical. Poetry is not defined by these very structured rules like other types of writing might be.
Grammar is oppressive.
I agree. Okay, so I thought to myself, who or what group or what tradition or practice seems to bring in all of these things that I like to talk about. So sort of the psychological angle, the spiritual angle on recovery, the arts. Who brings all of that in? And it seems like Sufist orders and Sufist practices bring that in. For whoever's not familiar with Sufism, it is essentially Islamic mysticism. There are many Sufis today who don't practice Islam, but call themselves Sufis, when most will probably align themselves with some sort of Islamic Sufi order. Another thing that's really important about the Sufis is that they are self-proclaimed addicts. They are addicts of God, as they would say, but they're also addicts of ego. They're trying to overcome the addiction to their own ego. That's a part of their religious and spiritual practice. They're in recovery forever, trying to get over the addiction to ego. And they're also trying to get over, trying to become addicted to God. So that addiction then substitutes the addiction to ego. They're also very interesting because they're poets, and that's how they present their theory, right? The theory of their faith, or the theory of what's happening within. It all comes out generally with poetry and music, and even in some Sufist orders it comes out in dance. So I thought they'd be an interesting group to discuss. So here's an example of how poetry brings out non-rational theory. So this is by Al-Hallaj. I am he whom I love, and he whom I love is I. We are two spirits dwelling in one body. If you see me, you see him. And if you see him, you see us both. So poetry, again, is unrestricting. Theory is able to come out in this way. And just to give you a little bit more background on the Sufist orders and how their journey is, they feel that they are moving along certain spiritual stations. And the work that they're doing on the outside to try and remove ego, for example, submitting themselves to an authority of a Sufi sheikh, that kind of thing, or a Sufi leader, that helps them to remove ego and transform the ego. So they go through three phases then with the ego: the commanding self, the blaming self, the soul at peace, and then the ultimate goal is, like I mentioned in my spoken word piece, fana, or the annihilation of the ego. So again, here is this notion of revolution, destruction. Here is where that's happening. That's actually the goal, is destruction. And then there is, for the Sufis, the annihilation in God. That is another higher step. And then what's left at the end of the day, that one might call the authentic self, that might be the rest. And how do they do it? Zikr, which is remembrance, chanting. That's a poetic device that they use, chanting the names of God. Sama, which means listening, and it usually involves either a formal or informal concert of music and dance. And Qawwali, which is in Islamic tradition in South Asia, is poetic recitation, but what it is it's actually singing. And then Wajd, which means finding ecstasy. There's many practices involved in that as well. So what we're seeing that's so interesting about the Sufi orders that may be of interest to people in recovery is that arts is being used in the spiritual process, it's being used in the actual rituals because of how powerful the arts can be. So here's an example of what a Sufi ritual will look like, and you can see how the arts are being brought into it to help again this recovery from addiction to ego. So the reason I showed you that is so that you can kind of just see how arts has been incorporated into this this daily recovery process that the Sufis are going through, that they've adopted as a part of their daily lives. Another thing that's kind of happening in the video is that is in producing this art, essentially is what's going on. They're dropping into the body, right? They're making use of the body. Art is not all in the head space. I thought it'd be fun if somebody could volunteer to read this. Okay.
Yes, this world is like a tree, and we are the half-ripe fruit upon it. Upon fruit clings tight to the branch because mature is ready for the palace. When fruit becomes ripe, sweet and juicy, then biting their lips, they loosen their hold. When the mouth has become sweetened by felicity, the kingdom of the world loses its appeal. To be tightly attached to the world signifies immaturity. As long as you are blood drinking is your business. When a man is busy and earnest, he is unconscious of his pain. I mention this insensibility to pain, so you may know how much the body resembles a garment. So go, seek the one who wears it. Don't kiss a piece of cloth. Our body is our veil in the world. We are like seed hidden beneath the straw.
Did anyone have any thoughts on that? Or okay, so the reason I put this one up here is again for the idea of dropping into the body to produce work. So what we have here is, did anyone taste this fruit? I could kind of taste it as she was reading it, right? So again, non-rational process, but super rational, that I can actually experience what's going on here without actually experiencing it, right? And so here we have something that I think is important when a person is trying to express authentic self, trying to drop into the body and experience it wholly.
I like the use of metaphors.
The metaphors are fantastic, yeah. And of course, the use of metaphor, just to quickly go off of that, metaphors are not intended to be taken literally, right? And yet metaphors somehow express truths beyond perhaps what we could express in logical sentences.
In a sense of oneness, I think, too. Like, connected to everything.
Intoxication now. Another reason why I thought Sufis were a really interesting group to look at from a recovery standpoint. So intoxication figures so prominently in Sufi poetry. And it figuratively and even literally in a way validates the desire for an altered state of reality. Jung had some very compelling thoughts on this, saying that seeking out altered states is not only natural, but it is, in a sense, necessary for the process of integration. So when we're not in an altered state of reality and sort of within a box, within a norm of how we think we need to be, and not altering that state, we are not experiencing all of the different things that we could be. And here's where the arts comes in. So the way that a Sufi poet might describe poetry is intoxicating. That is actually the process of writing the poetry is itself intoxicating, or hearing the poetry is intoxicating, but it's the right kind of madness, right? It's intoxication in God or in something that's healthier. And when done right, so here's another interesting thing about revolution here, bringing that back into the picture, the idea of inner revolution. When it's being done right, and the right kind of intoxication is taking place, it is both personally and socially disruptive. Right, so just like a bad intoxication may be disruptive, so is a good intoxication. It will disrupt and it will insist on progress of one kind or another. So these are from poems. I will reveal the secrets of being drunk on the wine of love in every town. If someone asks me, who gave you this wine to drink, I will point toward Medina. Medina is a holy place in Islam. Where is the door to the tavern, and where resides the preacher? All I know is this, that yesterday, as I was leaving, I saw him enter. So the tavern owner, the person who pours, the wine itself, again, figuring very, very prominently. These are metaphors that they really like in this tradition. Another thing that I thought was really interesting about this type of poetry is the one who pours is also another way of calling out to God. He is the one who pours the light, right? So, pour me the wine which burns the veil, for the seasons of the rose will not blossom every day. That wine which reveals the essence of life, that wine which intoxicates the universe. So this kind of defines it a little further. Okay, so before I finish off, does anyone have any questions so far?
They'll come later. The questions will come later.
Okay, yeah, I just saved some time for it. So I did get a chance to talk a lot about other art forms, painting and this kind of thing, but I hope that as everyone kind of walks through life and is looking at pieces of art, looking at architecture, looking at creations by other people, that we're not looking at them as these pretty things. You know, it's not all about the aesthetic. There is rebellion in every true piece of art form. There is revolution, there is insurrection, there is subversion in everything. And so one of the examples that I kind of wanted to put in your minds before you left today is even you look at Impressionist art, right? The prettiest of the pretty, the lily pads and the water and the trees. I hope that everyone's seeing how that is in and of itself very revolutionary. The way the brush strokes were so revolutionary. They were used to a certain kind of smoothness of, the classical art that came before that. They came in with these cocky, revolutionary brush strokes, right? There were people making images of things that perhaps their religions or their backgrounds prevented them from creating those paintings. So I hope that everyone's taking a look at that, because art, if it's truly innovative and honest, it is revolutionary and also contains the keys for inner revolution, for that decoding process to happen for the audience. So the arts are very, very revealing for me, and I feel like if we stop separating the arts from the rest of our lives as some separate hobby sort of thing that's on the side, I think if we stop doing that, we'll have the mirror. All right.
Thank you.